What if I told you that your brain can be tricked into believing things you know are false? That even when you're skeptical, even when you dismiss something as nonsense, it can still subtly influence your thoughts and decisions?
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
There's a hidden mechanism at play, a psychological quirk that affects us all, and it's called the sleeper effect. In this video, we're going to pull back the curtain on this surprising vulnerability in your thinking and reveal why misinformation sticks in your brain even when you know it's fake. The sneaky tricks your memory plays on you. How this affects everything from news to product reviews, and even conspiracy theories. And most importantly, how to protect yourself from falling victim. Imagine this, you're scrolling through your feed, and you see a headline, "Drinking pickle juice cures baldness." It's from a website you've never heard of, one that looks like it was designed in 1998, complete with flashing GIFs and Comic Sans font. You immediately dismiss it. The source is clearly not credible.
Bullshit.
But a few days later, you're chatting with a friend who's starting to lose some hair, and the pickle juice thing pops into your head. You don't remember where you saw it, but the idea is there. You might even think, I think I read something about that. That, my friends, is the sleeper effect in action. The key here is what psychologists call a discounting cue. Think of it as your brain's initial filter. It's something that makes you doubt the message at first. It could be a shady source, like our 1998 website, a warning label like "This information is for entertainment purposes only," or even just a general feeling of skepticism, that little voice in your head saying, "Hold on a minute." It's like a mental red flag, waving furiously and shouting, "Don't trust this." This cue is crucial because it initially reduces the persuasive power of the message. It's your first line of defense against misinformation. So, why does this happen? Why does that red flag eventually stop waving? Scientists have a few compelling theories. One of the most prominent is the differential decay hypothesis. This suggests that your brain processes the message itself and the discounting cue in fundamentally different ways. The message itself, the core content, like "pickle juice cures baldness," is usually more salient, detailed, and often emotionally charged, making it more memorable. Your brain creates a strong, easily accessible memory trace for it. Think of it like a well-worn path in a forest. You can easily find your way back to it.
I remember.
The cue, the source, the website's terrible design, the warning label, is often a peripheral detail, a simple tag attached to the message. It's less important to the core meaning, more like a small, barely visible side trail. Your brain doesn't prioritize storing it as strongly. Over time, that side trail becomes overgrown and harder to find.
I have no memory of this place.
This is the decay part of the hypothesis. The memory trace of the discounting cue decays faster than the memory trace of the message. It's like the message is written in permanent marker, while the source is written in disappearing ink. Another related idea is the dissociation hypothesis, which builds on the idea of differential decay. This doesn't necessarily mean forgetting the cue entirely, but rather forgetting the connection between the cue and the message. You might still vaguely remember something about the source. Maybe you remember it was a weird website, but you've forgotten the crucial connection between that source and the specific pickle juice claim. The file is still there in your brain, but the label has fallen off, and you can't remember which file it belonged to. This dissociation is supported by research on source monitoring, a cognitive process that helps us keep track of where information came from.
Who said that?
And guess what? Source monitoring is often surprisingly bad. We don't always remember who told us something, even if we remember what they said. It's like remembering a great joke but forgetting who told it to you. Now, let's look at a real-world example that perfectly illustrates this dissociation. Imagine a period of widespread concern about a certain global health issue. During this time, a lot of information, both accurate and inaccurate, was circulating. Researchers conducted a study where they presented people with both factual and misleading information about this health issue. Critically, some of the misleading information was presented by sources known to be unreliable. What they found was fascinating. Initially, people were less likely to believe the misleading information when it came from an unreliable source.
I do not believe it.
The discounting cue, the untrustworthy source, did its job. However, after a delay, people were just as likely to remember and even believe the misleading information, regardless of the source. The connection between the message and the unreliable source had weakened, demonstrating the dissociation hypothesis in action. The emotional charge and salience of the health issue made the information itself very memorable, overshadowing the source. This is a powerful real-world example of the sleeper effect in action. This all ties into how our memory functions. There are two main ways we retrieve information: familiarity and recollection. Familiarity is that feeling of "I've seen this before." It's fast, automatic, and often unconscious. It's like recognizing a face in a crowd without remembering where you know them from. Recollection, on the other hand, is a more deliberate and effortful process, where you actively retrieve specific details and context. It's like remembering the person's name, where you met them, and what you talked about. The sleeper effect capitalizes on familiarity. You might not recollect where you first encountered a piece of information, but the mere feeling of familiarity makes it seem more credible, more trustworthy. This is compounded by the illusory truth effect, a well-documented cognitive bias where repeated exposure to a statement, even a false one, increases its perceived truthfulness. Each time you see or hear something, even if you initially dismissed it, it becomes slightly more familiar, and that familiarity can be misinterpreted by your brain as evidence of truth. It's like your brain is saying, "I've heard this before, so it must be true," even if there's no actual evidence to support it.
I think I've heard it before.
This is a powerful example of how our cognitive biases can lead us astray. This is where the sleeper effect becomes especially relevant to the spread of conspiracy theories. These theories often originate from fringe sources with outlandish claims and little to no supporting evidence. Initially, most people rightly dismiss them. However, through repeated exposure on social media, in online forums, or even through casual conversations, these ideas become more familiar. The original source, the context of the initial encounter, is forgotten, but the core message, the conspiracy itself, lingers, gaining credibility simply through repetition and familiarity. This process is further amplified by social media algorithms, which can create echo chambers where people are constantly exposed to the same misinformation, further strengthening the feeling of familiarity. The sleeper effect is a powerful mechanism behind the persistence of conspiracy theories. It helps explain why people can hold onto beliefs that are demonstrably false. The initial skepticism fades, leaving behind only the familiar, albeit untrue, information, which then becomes part of their worldview and can be very difficult to dislodge. So, how do we defend ourselves against this subtle but powerful effect? How do we build mental resilience against misinformation? The good news is, you don't need to become a full-time fact-checker to protect yourself. There are some simple, practical habits you can integrate into your daily life that will significantly reduce your vulnerability to the sleeper effect. The first line of defense is a quick assessment of the source. Instead of getting bogged down in extensive research every time you see something online, develop the habit of the 1-second scan. Take a moment to glance at the website's domain name, check for an About Us page, and notice the overall design.
Who are you people?
Is it a professional-looking site from a known organization, or does it look like something your cousin made in his basement in 1998? These quick visual cues can often give you immediate red flags without requiring a deep dive. Next, train yourself to tag information mentally. When you encounter something questionable, make a conscious effort to associate it with its source or context. Even a simple mental note like, saw this on a random forum, or heard this from a friend who tends to share conspiracy theories, can be incredibly helpful. This simple act of tagging helps maintain the connection between the message and the discounting cue, making it less likely to dissociate in your memory. Perhaps the most powerful tool you have is the ability to pause and reflect. Implement the wait a minute rule. Before sharing, liking, or even fully accepting information, especially if it triggers a strong emotional reaction or aligns perfectly with your existing beliefs.
Wait a second. Think about it.
Take a breath and ask yourself some key questions. Does this sound too good to be true? Where did this information really come from? What's the evidence supporting this claim? Could there be other explanations? This brief pause activates your critical thinking circuits, giving you a chance to engage recollection rather than just relying on that feeling of familiarity that the sleeper effect exploits. Finally, when you encounter a claim that seems particularly dubious, employ the two-tab trick, also known as lateral reading. Open two tabs in your browser. Keep the original source open in one tab. In the other, search for reputable sources discussing the same specific claim. Don't just search for general information about the topic, look for sources that directly address the specific statement being made. Comparing what different sources say is a powerful way to quickly identify misinformation and prevent the sleeper effect from taking hold. The sleeper effect is a testament to the fact that our memories are not always perfect recorders of reality. They're complex, reconstructive processes that are susceptible to biases and distortions. By understanding how the sleeper effect works and by integrating these simple strategies into your daily information consumption, you can significantly strengthen your mental defenses and become a more discerning consumer of information in today's complex world. You can become a true mind artisan, actively crafting your own understanding of reality. What are your thoughts on the sleeper effect? Have you ever noticed it influencing your own thinking? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. Craft your brain. Subscribe for more.